Okay, so when it comes to using an airbrush, the position is very important. A bit like when you're using a spray can, you have to be quite close to the wall, and then you have to paint into this sort of zone. You can go up a bit and there, but really this is where you're working. You don't really want to stretch down there, and if you're doing a big line, you sort of want to open up your body, and then you go from here to here, that kind of thing. With airbrushing, it's kind of similar, but a bit more intensive. So you always want to hold it with two hands. You need to have the connection in order to have precise lines. It's a lot finer than a spray can. So in order to pinpoint exactly where you want to paint, you need to hold it with two hands. How you want to hold it, it's up to you. I sort of hold it with two fingers. It looks a bit silly, whatever, it's just what's comfortable for me. Some people hold it like that, some like that, whatever. But you need to have a connection with your other hand. This is how you do the precise lines. So say if I'm holding my phone and I'm painting, I'll be going like this for like the loose stuff. Maybe I'm painting some clouds or whatever. It doesn't really matter, it's not accurate. But the moment you want to do something accurate, say if I'm using my phone, I'm going to make a connection with the other hand while holding the phone, and then I'll be painting this way. So the most important thing you gotta learn when you're using an airbrush is how to use the trigger. It works a little bit different to a spray can. A spray can, you would basically press down. It's a single action. When you press, the paint comes out. The more you press, the more paint comes out. And then when you want to stop the paint coming out, you just lift your finger, end of story. An airbrush is a bit different. You want to press down for the air to come out from the compressor down to the hose and then all the way through the airbrush. But when you want the paint to come out, you want to pull back. So you press down to get the pressure, the air coming out, and you pull back for the paint. The more you pull back, the more paint comes out. And then the tricky part is when you want to stop painting, you're still pressing down, but now you want to push forward to stop. So as with a can, you would press normally at the back to control the can a bit more. The more you press, the more paint comes out. The less you press, the more you get a thinner line because less paint is coming out. Well, it works kind of like sideways, basically. So as you pull back, you've got, the more you pull back, the more paint comes out. And then when you want less paint to come out, you push forward. But you're still pressing on the trigger. And then after a while, you can let go. So you're basically pushing down, then you're going back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. And when you're ready, you let go. But if you were to press down, pull back for the paint to come out, and then lift up when you don't want any paint anymore, you get splatter all over your work. So again, we're going to do some exercises in a minute in the next segment, but this deserves to be slowed down all the way down because it's so important. If you get this movement correctly, it's like having a really good can control when you're using an airbrush, when you're using a can. It's so important to get that right. After that, everything else is just practice. So again, you press down for the air to come out, you pull back for the paint to come out, you pull a lot if you want a lot of paint to come out, and when you want to stop or reduce the flow, you push forward. You want some more to come out, you pull back, you want to stop or reduce, you push forward. And then when you're ready, you lift up. So basically it goes something like that. Press down and go shh, and then you pull back, forth, back, forth, back, forth. Say if I was to paint somebody's beard, I would be basically going like back and forth, so the paint comes out, doesn't come out, comes out, doesn't come out, but the air is continuously flowing, so then you don't have loads of splatter all over the work. It's just clean lines. In the same way with a can, you'd be going tss, 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 tss. So this is what you're trying to mimic, but this is a single action, this is a double action, because you press for the air and then you pull back or you push forward for the paint. Another thing as well, you don't want your hose to be dangling like this because it just pulls down. I find these 3-meter hoses are perfect for me because I'm quite tall, and say if I'm working at an event, if I'm working in a studio, it doesn't matter, I can prop up the compressor. But if I'm working at an event, most of the time the compressor's on the floor, so that can be down there, like a meter, and then I got a couple of meters to work comfortably. So what I like to do is I like to wrap the cord around my left arm and left hand, and then just, paint like this. So this way I can pull the cord up or down. It's not a problem, it's not tugging. And then I've got full control this way. It's very comfortable. If it's like this, there's just too much weight. The hose is just too heavy. So as I'm painting, I feel like this is getting dragged down. So it's not very comfortable. So you can do 1 or 2 turns around your arm, and then you can be a lot more comfortable this way to paint accurate lines. Okay, so now we're going to learn the basics of how to use an airbrush. So an airbrush is a bit complicated to work out at first, but don't be alarmed. I'm going to go step by step on what to do. I want you to be able to use the airbrush as confidently as you can, which is the only way you're going to be able to paint the artwork that you want. So we're going to learn how to do fades, how to do dagger strokes, how to do thin lines, how to do fills, how to do all kinds of things before we even start getting into painting a portrait and all that stuff. I want you guys, just like with the spray cans, if you watch that course, I want you guys to be able to use an airbrush just like I am or anybody else, just with a lot of confidence. So a few steps. As far as the setup, to start with, some compressors are powered by the mains and they're a bit more beefy, and some are battery powered. I really like this one. This is a little, it's got a little battery in there. It doesn't have as much power as this one, but sometimes when I'm out and about and I'm using cans and I want a bit more detail, I can just pull out the airbrush last minute, and it's a pretty small setup. This is quite heavy, so it works out to have something like this. So I'm just going to turn it on. You can see it's very quiet, and this is all that there is to it. This is my iWater Eclipse, and the airbrush that came with this compressor I chucked out because it wasn't very good. I had to buy a ring to connect them, and it was a bit of a faff, but now that I've got this setup, it's very useful for like small touch-ups. If you want to learn how to airbrush properly, I would say stay away from those. Get a compressor with that you connect to the mains, because you need to learn how to press, move back, move forward, move back, move forward. With an airbrush like this, it's a bit harder. So I'm going to take this off, and I'm going to connect it to the compressor. So this type of, most compressors you'll find, they either have a 1/8 fitting or a 1/4 fitting. This compressor has a quick coupling, so, and you can use 2 airbrushes. An airbrush is so demanding on air. You can use 2 airbrushes, but really they've done that so you can have 2 airbrushes set up at the same time, but you would use one or the other. You can't really use 2 airbrushes with the same compressor like for a long time, otherwise you'll just burn the compressor. So I'm going to connect this. Oh, there's already some air in the compressor. So I'm going to work backwards. First I'm going to connect the moisture trap. These are only about £5. Definitely get one. You don't want to get spiders on your work, and this is just going to stop the water from entering your airbrush. So we're going to put that in, connect that to the airbrush. You don't want to force anything. You want to find the thread properly, take your time, and then close everything without force. You don't need a spanner, just go nice and gently. So once it's connected, I'm going to put that in, and I'm going to turn it on. It's also very quiet, and it has a shut-off valve. There's a gauge on here and there's a gauge on here. This is set to 40 psi. No, actually it's a bit more. So I'm going to reduce this to 40 psi. So you've got a reading, at the moment it says 50, but as I press, it gets to 40. You want to see what it says when you're pressing. So 40 psi should be where you want to set it as. if you want to paint murals or canvases, all that kind of stuff. If you want to paint cakes or do body painting or all these other things, you want to set it to about 25 psi. Especially for cakes, if you were to have 40 psi as you're pressing, it's just too much power. It will blow the food away. So for this type of application, 40 psi is perfect. Okay, so now we're going to put some paint in a cup. I'm going to use black. When you're practicing, use black. Don't use white. You can use blue, you can use brown. Just don't use any light colors as you're practicing. They're the hardest ones, and I used to be so frustrated using white, and I didn't know why. But it seems white, when it comes to tattoo paints, airbrush paints and all that, it's just not the best. I guess what is it made of? Titanium dioxide, I think. And I'm guessing that's the best pigment manufacturers found, but it probably doesn't work as well. I don't know. Anyway, we're going to shake that. I'm going to put some paint in the cup. All right. Cool. Put the cup. I never actually have the cup on the airbrush. It feels a bit weird, but we shall do it properly. Right, so I'm going to be painting on this. So before I even start, like I just said in the previous segment, what you want to do is you want to press down on the trigger and you want to press back to get the paint to be released into the airbrush, and you want to press forward to stop the flow. You don't want to lift your finger up. So just to show you what it looks like, I'm pressing, and as you can see, there's no paint there. If I pull back, you see some paint is coming out. If I pull back more paint will come out. I'll take out the cup. First, give it a go. You don't want to go too complicated to start with, just give it a go. Now, my technique is not going to be perfect because I'm filming and you need to see what I'm doing, but really when you are painting, you don't want to be off to the side. You want to be in front of the airbrush. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to press down and pull back and push forward. So press down, pull back and push forward. So if you start by doing that, we're going to press, pull, push forward, pull, push forward, press down, pull, push forward, pull, push forward, pull, push forward, and lift. You don't want to press, pull, and lift. Press, pull, and lift. You don't want to do that. You see, it's just, you get all of these funky patterns. What you want to do is you want to press, pull, push forward, pull, push forward. And you also want to mix, now we're going into dagger strokes, you want to mix the distance from going far and close as you're pulling and you're pushing. So normally the closer you are, the smaller amount of pull you're going to have on the trigger. So I'm quite close, I'm close to the board, I'm going to pull just a little bit. I can even pull less than that and be closer. And I can go a little bit further and pull more. Go a little bit further away and pull even more. And the max I can pull with this airbrush is this much. So, one quick note, as you're painting, sometimes you'll press and you'll pull and nothing will happen. That means you've got a blockage. Don't keep pulling, otherwise you'll get some like this. So as you pull and you see nothing happens, just aim away from your artwork and give it full blast to hopefully get rid of whatever's in the way, and then you can carry on painting. Cool. So again, I just want to show you. So you press down, you pull, and you push. You pull, and you push. Pull, push, and you lift. You don't pull back, lift, pull back, lift. No, no, no. You pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, pull, push, and lift. Okay? Now, to give you a bit more of an insight, I'm going to show you from this angle. So I'm quite close to the airbrush now, to the wall now. Okay, so now I'm quite close to the wall, and then I'm going to press and pull a little bit and push forward. I'm going to pull and push forward. Pull and push forward. Now I'm going to pull more and push forward. And push forward. So now what I want to do is so obviously feel free to do as many lines as possible. I just want to, give you all the highlights so the course doesn't take like 50 hours or something. But feel free to take your time with this. Now we're going to mix the distance between being close to the board and away from the board. So remember, when we're close, we pull just a little bit. And when we're away, we pull more. If you pull a little bit and you're away, what will happen is you'll do a soft pattern. As you can see, you can barely see this one. If I keep applying, obviously it'll get darker. This is the nature of using an airbrush. An airbrush will give you a very gentle mist, as opposed to a spray can where the droplets of paint are way thicker. So this is a really good way to apply light amount of paint. And you can do some really good effect with that. Okay, so now going back on track, we're gonna start from near, and then we're gonna pull away. And as we pull away, we're going to pull on the trigger more. And then we're going to push forward. And then as we get closer, we're going to pull just a little less. And these are called dagger strokes. They're not super easy to do. So if you can't do them, don't worry. Eventually, you'll be able to do them. That's no worries. Some people make a big deal of it. I tend not to, because I find they can be a bit difficult. Anyway, so we're going to press down. We're going to pull a bit less as we get closer, and then we're going to stop. So see, there's this shape. And also is with the speed. So as you pull away, you pull a bit faster. But as I said, they're not super easy to do. So if you can't do them, don't worry, just give it time. But what's cool is to vary the distance between the airbrush and your board, and also the amount of pull that you have on the trigger. So instead of being near, going far and going back to near, maybe let's try doing near and far only. So and as you can see, as I'm doing all of those strokes, I'm keeping my finger down on the trigger. This is something I'm gonna say as many times as possible till you get bored of hearing it. You really don't wanna do that. If you do that, your work will never be great. So you really wanna keep the pressure down on the airbrush. Let's see, I'm still pressing. Okay, so now we're going to fill a circle and a square. So first I'm going to do a circle. and then we're going to fill it. So I like to use spray paint techniques for this. So I will aim at the center, a bit like a spray can. Normally people would use some type of mask. You can. Some people love to use a lot of masking tape, Frisket film, all kinds of curves or whatever. I guess it's because I'm used to using cans that I like to do everything freehand. But you don't have to do it like me. You just do whatever works for you. And what's cool is to do it in burst. So as I'm going to do a little burst, a bit of paint here, a bit of paint here, a bit of paint here, you'll see that I'm pressing down. I want to do most of the talking when the compressor's off. So I'm going to be pressing down, but I'm going to be moving back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I'm aiming to the center. So one thing that is important is for you to go slow at the beginning. I struggle to go slow when I'm teaching, but it's just a habit. But whenever you're doing it, don't try to do it at that speed yet. You want to learn the movement properly, and then you can go as fast as you want. But if you end up doing that, just slow down. You need to get the movement correct. Again, to do it correctly, we're going to do some lines. So we want to press, pull, push forward. So my lines are not great because I'm obviously going very slowly as I'm explaining what I'm doing. If I do it without explaining and taking too long, I'll move a bit faster. And you see the lines are now fine. But what you want to do is it's a bit like when you, again, I keep referring to cans, I can't help it. But what you want to do is, if you do 4 lines this way, you want to start moving as you're pressing, and then you want to pull back, and then push forward and carry on moving. And then you do it again. And you're going to do a few of those. This is an exercise that's very valuable. I reckon out of the people I taught, this is an exercise that helps people greatly. So you're going to go slow at first, and you're going to practice to go a bit faster. So we're going to press, we're going to pull, and then we're going to press. But I mean, we're going to press all the way through. So we're pressing, pulling, pushing, moving. Pressing, pulling, pushing, keep moving. And if you do that with speed, it looks something like this. But again, don't worry about the speed yet. What you want to do is you want to start traveling. So you're pressing, but you want to start traveling, and then pull back on the trigger as you're traveling, instead of starting here, which gives you a dot and a potato at the end as well. So you want to press in movement. Again, same movement as with a spray can, but just in a smaller format. So you want to move, pull, and push. You pull, push, pull, push, pull, push as you're moving, and then you get much better lines. We're going to do a continuous line. This is a really good exercise to work on your thin lines, basically. Don't worry if when you're painting you get some of these. It doesn't matter. Just carry on and try to make a line that's as thin as possible. We're going to do something like this. But if you get some of those potatoes, don't worry, just keep going. And the idea is to try and gauge the distance between you and the board and pull back the right amount. Okay, so as you can see, I was trying to do a continuous line, but then we got some paint missing. This is because the paint is starting to dry in the cup. So I'm going to put my finger here and then pull back to mix whatever's in the cup. And then give it a couple of blasts. And then try again. A lot of the time, that's all you need to clear what's in the way. The more you pull back, the less you'll have a problem. It's just whenever you go small, and especially if you take out the front cup, if there's any blockage, that's when you will have problems. Don't bend the needle. So don't worry too much about how to get thin straight away. And to be honest, I think my paint needs to be warmed up and needs to be diluted just a little bit more. But let's not worry too much about this now. We're going to focus on doing thicker lines. So the more I'm pulling away from the board, the more I'm pulling on the trigger. If I don't do that, if I pull the same amount, then I get a line that's very fuzzy. So it's good for you to know all of these effects, because depending on what you're painting, you need to know maybe you want to do a very shallow line, and you can pull fully, but in little bursts to get some sort of shadow. And this is how you airbrush. You really want to overlap small amount of paint as opposed to doing a big pull like this where it's very dark straight away. An airbrush is kind of like using a can, like a transparent black, for example, where you can have a lot of control. You can just paint a little bit at a time in order to get just darker with a lot of control. I'll get to black eventually, but then I'm going through a lot of steps to have as much control as possible. And I can do shadows. If I want a shadow to be even more shallow, I can put a bit of water, and then the paint will be even more shallow. Another technique that you'll use sometimes, this is the wrong way to do things, but also you can use it to your advantage. So you can pull back without pressing down, and then eventually when you pull back and when you press forward, you'll get this splatter. Sometimes in your paintings, this can be something that's very useful. I'm a bit close. If I move back a bit, so I'll do the same again, and then you get this sort of splatter, which can be really useful when you're doing stardust and that kind of stuff. And also, now we're going to practice how to do little dots. So you want to get close, you want to press, and then you want to pull back gently. Now we're going to do bigger ones by pulling more, and as I'm pulling more, I'm going to have to move away from the wall. Okay, I was recording a lot of exercises, but for some reason the camera stopped recording. So we're going to try again. So now what you want to do is really do as many dots and lines as possible. So you want to vary the distance and the amount of pull on the trigger. So if you're doing dots, you're going close to the wall, and then you're getting stuck in one position, and then you pull gently as much as you want. So you start by a small dot, and then the more you pull, the more you make a bigger dot. A spray can, you probably get about here, as far as small as you can go. So an airbrush can take it way further. This is not even as small as you can go. So when you use spray cans and airbrushes together, you can get some really nice artwork going on. So now what you want to do is you want to do this dagger stroke sort of thing, where you close to the wall, you pull back, you pull away, and then you come closer. You can also do them in, if it takes you a while, this is totally fine. You may need to go a bit slower, but I'm just showing you the principle, and then you can just do as many as you want over the however many days you want to do. This, to get to this point, took me quite a while. I mean, to do that with spray cans, I can teach that to somebody in an hour. When it comes to airbrushing, it takes a lot longer. If you're the sort of person that gets it really quickly, then brilliant. But most people, it takes ages. So if you're slightly frustrated and you're like, oh, I can't do it, everybody's done the same with airbrushing. It takes a while. Like another thing you can do this line, but instead of doing it straight, you can do it wavy, and you can vary the distance from close to far, and you can vary how much you pull on the trigger from a lot to a little. This exercise will allow you to get really comfortable with how much you have to pull the trigger and what distance you need to have against the wall. Okay, so this section is going to be about tips and, more importantly, troubleshoot. An airbrush is a great tool, but is also quite problematic at times. And when you're new to it, you don't know why it's going wrong, why something's happening. And you may Google it, you may go online and try and find a solution. And sometimes it can be infuriating. I remember when I started painting, I was painting my car, and things were going wrong. I didn't know what I was doing, and then threw the airbrush across the workshop. Not ideal. So hopefully with this, with these key points that I wrote down, it's gonna shed some light on what it could be, on what could be wrong with your airbrushing, with your painting. Okay, so to start with, I'm just going to say that a lot of the time, the problems that you encounter with your airbrush is because it's not clean enough. So maybe you've been painting for a while, it's been a couple of hours or something, and then the paint is starting to dry. Stop, take it apart, clean it. So I'm going to run through some points, and afterwards I'll show you how to clean it properly. It's fairly easy to clean. You just have to be gentle with it, because you don't want to damage the needle, and you definitely don't want to damage the nozzle. Actually, on the way a few days ago to the workshop to film this, I dropped my airbrush at home and I damaged the nozzle. So a lot of the time you will take out the back and you will take out the cup, and some of the time you'll take out the front, not this entire piece, but just the front bit. And my airbrush was kind of at the front, but it was like that. I dropped it, and that pushed all the way the nozzle, and the nozzle cracked. So I just had to buy another one. So it's a good thing that a second one, whenever you airbrushing, it's always good to have two, like a spare nozzle and a spare needle. The needle is not as bad because if you bend it or damage it, you can shape it and put it back into place. But the nozzle, once it's cracked, you just have to buy another one. They're too fiddly and all that. This airbrush is, I'm sure I said it at the beginning, this airbrush is an Eclipse, iWater Eclipse, and it comes with this nozzle setup, which is a 0.35 nozzle. So this number refers to the size of the hole. I'm not quite sure what unit it is, but it's very small. And the needle is also very small. I don't love that size, and especially the shape of that nozzle is not my favorite. So I've had a few of those airbrushes. I like to buy a 0.5, which is a bit bigger, and you have to buy the needle that goes with it. And what's great is you can just take out the needle and the nozzle. These are both 0.35, and replace them with a 0.5 setup. It allows you a bit more discrepancy because the hole is slightly bigger. You can just paint with a lot less drama. It's not as difficult to use. That is if you don't drop the airbrush on the kitchen floor like I did. Right, but that's just a quick note. Most of the problem you encounter with the airbrush is that it's going to be dirty and you just need to clean it. The paint dries, water-based paint, but if you use oil-based paint, it dries as well. You just need to clean it from time to time. But we'll do that afterwards. Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about what happens if the paint is not coming out of the airbrush. So that could be because the paint is too thick. Maybe you're using an acrylic, maybe you're using some emulsion-based paint, which is very thick. The best thing would be to use a dedicated airbrush paint or airbrushed inks or marker pen, like Posca pens, paint, I guess it is. Something more fluid, or you can water it down. The best way to find out if the paint is too thick is to remove the paint, clean the cup, whether you have an airbrush with a cup or whether you have the small bottles that feed from underneath. Clean all of that and then just put water in the cup or the bottle and then spray. If it works with just water, if it works fine with water, that means your paint is the problem. So just thin down your paint, use a different paint, different ink, and that should solve the problem. Another problem as well is you might have too much pressure. The optimum range when you're airbrushing is between 20 to 40 psi, 45 sort of. If you were to set your compressor to say 60 psi or 50-ish psi, sometimes it's too much to pick up the paint. So the way this works is the air goes from the compressor down the hose, and then it goes this way, and as it goes, the paint drops and gets sucked in with the air, and they go together. If it's from a bottle, the fact that the air goes picks up the paint and make it travel down the front of the airbrush. The thing is, when you have too much pressure, this is just too much resistance, and it goes from being able to pick, either letting it fall down with gravity or pick it up with the suction. It goes from doing that to having too much force and too much pressure, and it doesn't allow the paint to travel through the pipe. So what you want to do is reduce the amount of pressure that you've got in your airbrush. Normally, if you put it down to about 40 psi, you'll get the best results. Okay, another reason the paint might not be coming out is, for example, you've been painting for a few hours. The paint inside the walls of the pipe of the airbrush, the paint that's around that is starting to dry up, and it doesn't allow for the fresh paint to go through. So the best thing is stop what you're doing, clean the airbrush, and resume what you're doing. A lot of the time you can get rid of the blockage simply by putting your finger in front and then pressing and then pulling back onto the trigger. And that sort of kicks everything back up to the cup. If you have the cup, it'll probably make it jump. Not in this case, but sometimes they will. So it's best to take out the cup when you do this. A lot of the time when you're mixing the paint, you will just add some paint or some water. You just put your finger in the front, and then by going back and forth, you allow the paint to mix. But you can use this technique to unblock small blockages. If it's major, you'll have to clean the airbrush. Another problem as well is sometimes you'll be painting and then you realize the pattern that you're getting is very coarse, like all the little droplets of paint are very thick and they're not very misty and nice and fine. That happens when you don't have enough pressure. With a compressor like this, it's not a problem because you can easily go from 10 psi all the way to 60 psi. It's a very powerful machine and it's no problem. But sometimes you'll go online and you'll buy a compressor without a hose that attaches, a very small compressor that attaches to the airbrush, or you'll have a hose and a very small compressor. They're very useful and they're very portable. They're great when you're doing most of your work with spray cans and you just want to do a bit of touch up with the airbrush. But they don't, obviously, due to their size, they don't have enough power to kick all the way to say 40 psi. So they will stay about 15-20 psi. So if you have a compressor that allows you to turn it up, then obviously crank it up, and that will allow a more misty result, a much better, a much finer paint pattern. But if it's a cheaper compressor or a smaller compressor, you're pretty much stuck with that type of pattern, and then you just need to upgrade your compressor to something a bit more beefy, basically. Another thing as well, you always want to have a tank. I know I said it before, but you always want to have a tank with your compressor. It allows the compressor to have a bit of a buffer, and first of all, it won't burn the motor. I've seen that happen before, and it's actually happened to me, not with an airbrush compressor, but with a normal full-size compressor, where the safety valve just breaks. This is actually one to empty the tank. You can see, I don't know if you can see on camera, but there's a bit of orange. This is rust from inside the tank. But there's also a safety shut-off valve. And if that comes off, then that's end of story. Another problem you may encounter is sometimes when you're painting, the paint is running. It's not a compressor issue, it's not an airbrush issue, it's a user error issue. So what you need to do is just to remember, with an airbrush, you apply the paint in thin layers. If you try to apply it too thick, it'll just run. So let it dry, maybe sand it, and then start again. Yet another problem you may encounter is when you're painting, you get a spider effect on your work. And that's because you got water in the tank that's traveling through the pipe, through the hose, and then going through the airbrush, and then mixing with the paint and the air, and then you get all three at the same time, and then you get the spider effect. This is something I haven't had for years, because now I always use this extension, which is a moisture trap. And what it does is, if there's any water, it'll go in here, and then it'll get trapped into this compartment. You've got a button here where you can clear any water that you may have, and then you've got no problem on your work. This won't happen straight away. It'll happen a few hours after you've been painting. There's some condensation that build up in the tank, and then it can travel through. You've got quite a big reservoir in here, and sometimes you actually forget to empty it, and then you see some spiders come out, and then you just press it a few times, get rid of the water, and then it's no problem. But it also depends on the maintenance of your compressor. One thing you should always do when you're done is empty the compressor. With this one, I can just take out the hose because it's got quick couplings, but that's not a great thing to do because the tank is still full of air. And if I leave it like this, all the moisture that's in the air that filled up the tank will now turn into water and make the tank rust. So the problem with that is when you're painting, that can also travel up. If you don't have a moisture trap, you'll have some problem. So every time you're done with your compressor and painting, empty your tank all the time. You'll always have some type of thing that you can pull to empty the tank, or you can simply just connect the hose and then just unscrew slightly, either from this side or this side. And this will allow the tank to fully empty. Always do that every time you're done with your compressor, and it will last a lot longer. Sometimes you'll be using a good paint that you're happy with normally, and then when you're trying to paint, it doesn't come out of the cup, it's too thick. And then you've done the thing about putting water in, and it works with the water, but it doesn't work with the paint. And that sometimes is because it's too cold. The paint sort of freezes up, and maybe not freezes up, but solidifies a little bit because it's too cold. So all you have to do is just warm up the paint. You don't really want to put it in the microwave or anything, but if you have a radiator, you just want to put it next to the radiator. Or maybe you can put some hot water in a container, and then just put your container in that. Not so that it's too hot and they'll melt the plastic, but just hot enough, and so it will turn the paint back into a liquid form, into a more runny state. And then this way you should paint nice and easy. In the UK, in the winter, this is something we definitely have to do, because otherwise the paint is too viscous and it won't come out the airbrush. So just good to remember. For this next thing, I'm just going to put a bit of airbrush cleaner into the cup. And then one thing you sometimes encounter, I get this pretty much every time I paint, because I normally paint for quite a few hours at a time. And sometimes the paint, every time you press, it will bubble up. And the problem is the seal is not doing its job. So what you have to do is just tighten it a bit more until you don't see the bubbles anymore. In this case, I still see bubbles when I'm just pressing for the air. So I can try and block the front and go back and forth to clear the blockage. But as I'm pressing the air only, I'm still getting bubbles. This means the inside of the hole of the airbrush is clogged up with dried up paint. I just need to take it all apart and clean it, which I will do in a bit. Another good thing as well with iWater airbrushes is there's a seal, there's a gasket at the front, and sometimes that gets worn out. But a really cool thing is they actually put one of those seals at the back. This is only so then it's comfortable when you hold the airbrush. It doesn't need a seal. It can just totally, there's no pressure or anything in there. So if this seal gets damaged, you can just throw it away and use the one that's at the back. So you kind of have a spare, which is a handy feature to have. I don't know if they've done that on purpose or not, but it's useful. Another thing that will happen when you've been painting for a few hours is as you just press for the air, and you're not pulling back for the paint, just pressing for the air, you're getting a dot on your work. So some paint is coming out where it should just be air. And obviously after going back and forth like this for hours, this nut is getting a bit loose. So all you have to do is just loosen it up a bit, pull back on the needle, then push it gently, and as you're pushing, tighten the nut. You really want to be gentle with this, because if you push too hard, you'll crack the nozzle at the front, and then you're going to spend another 20-30 pounds to change it. Now you can put this back, and then you can, whoop, it's still blocked. There's another thing that you may encounter, and this is not a problem that is caused by the airbrush, nor the compressor, nor the hose, nor the paint, nor yourself. Well, yourself, yes. And this is once you've done the artwork, you're going to put a lacquer on it. If it's a car, motorbike, a helmet, a guitar, a skateboard, you'll need to put some type of lacquer to protect the paint, basically. And when you do that, you've got to remember a rule of thumb that's very important. These lacquers, you can get a 1-pack or a 2-pack. So the 1-pack is just a regular, paint, basically. It's just a see-through paint, and you just apply it I can apply some of this now, I can apply some of it from this can in 6 months and it'll be fine. But you've got another type, it's not this one, but I don't have one here, which is a 2-pack or 2-part lacquer. And basically, when you look underneath, there'll be a red button, and you have to smash the red button to pierce the activator inside the can, and then you'll have the lacquer and the hardener that will mix together. So the rule of thumb is you can use a 1-pack, then a 2-pack. But you should never use a 2-pack than a 1-pack, because it creates a chemical reaction that makes the paint wrinkle. And if it happens to you, you will be panicking. It happened to me with a friend of mine. I painted a guitar and everything was cool, lacquered it, put 1-pack, put 2-pack, and then I ran out, so I put some 1-pack on top. And then I was like, what's going on? The paint started to wrinkle and shrivel up. And I was like, oh no, and it turned out it was just a chemical reaction. This can also happen when you've got grease on your work. So say you're painting a car, you left some grease, and then you're putting the lacquer, this may happen. So whenever you're working on a body panel or a guitar or anything quite precious, wear gloves, because the oil from your hands may, it's not really, it's a bit rare, but it's possible the oils of your hands may interfere with the lacquer. So if you wear plastic gloves, it's just going to work well. But most of the time, it will be some type of grease that, you know, is on the car you haven't seen, and, you know, it creates a problem. So if you just want to use this type of lacquer, the 1-pack, just use that and that's fine. If you want to use the 2-pack, then just use the 2-pack, it's fine. Or you can use the 1-pack, then the 2-pack, but never do 2-pack first, then 1-pack afterwards. Otherwise, you'll get big trouble. And now we're going to take the airbrush apart and clean it. Okay, so I'm going to take the airbrush apart and I'm going to show you how to clean it. If it's your first time taking it apart and you're a bit scared that you're not going to know how to put it back together, just use your phone and film yourself taking it apart so you can trace your steps if needed. And you can just put it back together. So it's good to have some type of container. If you're washing it above the sink, be careful because some parts may fall in. It's not ideal. Right, so I'm just going to take everything off. If you have an ultrasound, they clean an airbrush really well, but you can clean them by hand. I'm just going to undo everything. Cool. So here I've got some airbrush cleaner. This is from Vallejo. There's another one by iWater. I used to think these were just like water, but it's not. They actually clean. They clean an airbrush really well. If you don't want to use that, you can also use acetone, but wear gloves because it's not great. I just find this cleans the airbrush a lot better than acetone. Acetone is great if you're working and you don't have any, and you can just go in the shop and get some nail polish remover, which is acetone, and then you can clean your airbrush. But careful on the container because it might destroy the container. But yeah, this is pretty good, and also water. You can use earbuds. I don't actually have any earbuds with me, but there's another thing I use a lot is just tissues. These work well. And first, we're just going to put some water in there. And a bit of that. Right, so I like to start with the needle because the easiest part to clean. There you go, nice and gently. This part never really have anything stuck to it. You can see there's some paint stuck on my airbrush. When you're working, especially if you're doing an event or something like that, your airbrush gets covered in paint, you can't, I mean, you could clean it, but it takes ages. You just eventually your airbrush is clean on the inside and not so clean on the outside. All of these parts don't really need to be cleaned. The ones that really need to be cleaned are the ones that have a contact with the paint. This, sometimes you get a build-up on the trigger. These come with a lube, so you can lubricate the trigger, because the trigger gets a lot of use, so that needs a bit of lubricant. If it doesn't come out, you can just put a bit more airbrush cleaner. So it's not diluted. But to be honest, I don't really pay much attention to the outside of the cup or the lid. They're just, you have to, when you're using an airbrush, you end up cleaning it so much that eventually you just clean the parts that need cleaning, and the rest, well, they get overlooked. Just gonna clean that as well. Now these are not really problem parts. The nut at the back is not a problem. Spring is not a problem. Now the ones that create a problem are these three. The needle as well, sometimes it gets a bit of dry paint stuck at the front, but apart from that it's pretty fine. As you're painting, this is where the paint comes out basically. And then there is often a buildup of paint, especially when you're using white or lighter colors. You'll have a buildup, and it obstructs the flow of the airbrush. So you just want to take that out. A lot of the time those paints are slightly viscous, so you can just pick at them with like a needle, or maybe a sewing needle or something. You can just pick at it and then pull, and the whole thing will just clear. Also, so this is a great thing to basically save the nozzle and the needle, because sometimes you have to paint, you have to be so close to the canvas that if you don't have that, you would damage your needle. But in order to be really precise, sometimes you need to take this out and be even closer to your work. You just have to be careful not to damage the needle. Now we're going to clean this part. I can see there's a lot of dry paint in there. I'm just going to put my finger in there, put a bit in the cup, and then soften the paint and clean it all. As an hobbyist, you probably will use your airbrush and clean it. But as a professional, sometimes you're on a job, and after you've been painting for 7 hours, you're on your feet. The last thing you want to do is clean the airbrush. You just want to put it in the bag and go home and sleep. Or sometimes, you know, as soon as you're done, the client just wants you to leave, basically. So a lot of the time it's not possible for you to clean it. So it does get, you know, slightly clogged. The reason I like this airbrush is that right here. So this is the 0.35 nozzle. And as you can see, there's a little bit at the front, which I don't really like. The one that's a 0.5, all of this body is just one continuous cylinder basically. And what that does is I get to clean the cylinder easily. There isn't a step. With this, there is a step. So if I jam the needle at it, I will damage the needle. So that's why I prefer the other one as well. And it's just easier and more forgiving to use. Now what you can do is take a corner and then make a sort of cone with a bit of airbrush cleaner, and then you can put that inside the nozzle and then just spin and clean the walls of the nozzle. Another good thing to do as well is you can use the needle to go in, and then you can scrape the inside walls of the nozzle with this. Again, you have to be gentle because you don't want to damage anything. It's a very precise tool and you have to be gentle with it. You can put a little bit of cleaner in there. If you have smaller fingers than mine, it'll be a lot easier, but whatever. Okay, and then what you want to do is you want to turn and push, and turn and push, and turn and push. And so you're basically scraping the dry paint on the inside and then you're pushing it out. And because I put some airbrush cleaner, it just softened the paint. Now, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but there's like this dry paint at the front that's being pushed out. And I can just take it out. You really want to be careful not to push too hard at the front, because the moment you crack the nozzle, that's it. There's no going back. You just have to buy a new one. They're very delicate. So I'm pushing and I'm spinning at the same time to try and get all the paint that's creating a blockage out. I can see it's still there, trying to get it out gently. Got most of it, but there's still some. Cool. All right, I think that's most of it. And then we're going to clean this out a bit. Good thing about using an airbrush cleaner or acetone is it'll soften the paint, so you can put it in there and then just wait a bit and then really jam the tissue paper. Earbuds are great for this because it gives you a bit of a stick and a bit more control, but you can just use that and that's fine. Another thing I like to use is the back of the needle and then go in there and then just push anything that may be blocking the flow. Then you can go all the way from the back and try and see if there's anything obstructing the paint. Cool. I'm just going to put a bit more cleaner in the cup and try and let it travel down a bit. Okay, now it feels pretty fluid. I think the airbrush should be clean and ready to use. Just in case the problems are still there, I'll just have to clean it further. So you can see here the difference between a 0.5 and a 0.35. So this has a cylinder that goes all the way through, so it's easy to basically rotate and push when you're cleaning it. As opposed to this one, it's got a bit of a step and it's not as easy, so you have to push and go around. It works, but I prefer this one. The thing is, as you can see here, this is massive. I mean, actually, this is a 0.35 needle. This is the 0.5, which is slightly more abrupt at the end. You can see this one is narrower and this one is a little bit thicker. So these two go together and these go together. But as you can see, this comes out way too much. It's not supposed to come out all that much. It's only it normally comes out about this. So this is because when I drop the airbrush, it's sort of pushed everything forward. With the weight of the airbrush, just pushed and cracked the front. I mean, this is very tiny, it's a very small part, but you can see now it's cracked. So as the needle goes forward and back, there's the air and the paint can go through the side. So then it gives you a funky pattern when you're painting. So once this happens, there's just no fixing it. This is good for the bin. Right, so this is my sewing needle that I use sometimes to clean stuff. So now we're going to put it back together. And the first thing, I'm going to use a bit of this eye water lube that comes with the airbrush. You can buy that separately, but to be honest, when you buy an airbrush, they give you one of those and it lasts for ages, so you don't really need to. So now you just want to put a little bit, like a drop or two down there. Oops, I missed it. This is where this is where the trigger goes up and down. There's a notch at the back, so you have to make sure that goes at the back. Obviously, I'm showing you this model, but if you get an Apache, or whatever airbrush, or any different types of airbrush, it would work differently. You see, as you press the trigger, it presses this bit, and it allows the air to go through the compressor through a small opening in the airbrush. So that should be able to move freely. So I like to put the trigger first because there's a bit of an order. Once you've put the trigger, you can't mess it up. Sometimes you'll put it back together and then you forget the trigger and you have to take it all apart again. Right, next we're going to put the nozzle, then this piece. I think the gasket at the front might be too damaged, and I think that's why I'm still getting some bubbles coming out. So I'll try to replace it with this one, but I've got a feeling I've already replaced it once already. I think I swapped them around, so I don't know. But yeah, so I'm just going to push that. Next, we're going to put this part with the spring. Obviously, I've taken this airbrush apart so many times, I know how to do it, but if it's your first time taking it apart, don't be alarmed. And it's definitely something you're going to have to do often, so get familiar with it. Now we're going to put the needle, oops, ow, in there. I'm not going to go all the way down. I'm going to put this piece back. And the guard at the front, oops. I find that when you spend a bit of money on an airbrush, it becomes a bit of a workhorse. It becomes a lot more forgiving. I've had cheap airbrushes, like £20 airbrushes, and they work fine, but they really lack when they're not very clean. Then it becomes a problem. Okay, so now the needle, I'm going to put this in there, and what I'm going to do is push and spin. But I want to be gentle. Obviously, I don't want to crack the nozzle because I'm on my last one. So I'm pushing and then spinning. Cool. Put this. And when you're done, you should hear this. It should easily snap into place. If it stays stuck, it means you've got some paint that's stuck in there. So take it apart again and then clean it again. Sometimes it'll be really annoying. You've just cleaned it and it still doesn't work. You just got to take it apart again and clean it. And this is one of the frustration of using an airbrush. It really needs to be very clean. But when you see how small the hole is, so compared to a spray paint cap, you see that this is very tiny. So it's got a big opening there, like this has a big opening, and this has a fairly small hole, and so does this. But you've got a lot more pressure from a spray can, and also a spray can will, the paint will come out of this nozzle, and then once this nozzle is clogged up, then you just throw it away and then use another one. This would be a bit pricey to throw the airbrush away. So you'll find when you first get an airbrush, for 2 weeks it'll work perfectly. After that, it starts to not work as well. That's because you've got dry paint that's building up inside the airbrush. So just take it away, take it apart and clean it. Perfect.